Hello everybody and welcome back to Pokémon Emerald. Since lately I have been playing through the game with a lot of Pokémons from the second generation, I think it's about time I do a run with the starters, since that's usually what is first used in any given game. And of course, in Pokédex order, the first starter of the second generation is Chikorita, arguably the worst starter ever, at least competitively. At least I can say that Chikorita caused me to get my first level 100 Pokémon, sort of. I mentioned the story a while ago, but I'll touch on that later. For the rules, I can only use my starter in combat, I can't use items from my bag in battle, I can't raise my evasion in any way, and I can't use cheats or glitches. Chikorita is a grass type, and much like many other pure grass types, it suffers a big problem of bad move pool. Most of his attacks are either grass, neutral, or status moves. That leaves a lot to be desired, since many Pokémon resist both of them, and taking something down with status moves is going to take forever. Being a starter, it should have an even matchup against me, except for the fact that I lost twice. Yeah, Chikorita's stats are not very good either. It focuses on defenses, which is already quite bad for this kind of runs, and the nature I got is not very good either, since it increases my defense even further, but lowers my already quite bad speed. After getting back on our feet from the May mess, I can take on the grunt in the forest, and fortunately at least this guy is not a problem. Soon after defeating him and rescuing the Sylph guy, we have to take on the first gym. And fortunately this is one of the spots where Chikorita can shine. At level 8 it learned Razor Leaf, which is a very good grass move, or at least it is compared to pretty much any other grass move in this generation. But unfortunately, even with a good move, I still ended up struggling a bit against Nosepass, because my special attack is not very good. And of course, all the potions from Roxanne did not help. Overall though, it was still an easy match, and I was able to defeat her in the first attempt. After getting her badge, I can do some more stuff around town and then leave, but before I can do so, I have to be defeated a couple more times by May. Her starter Torchic now has a stab move, which is extremely bad for me considering that I already had a lot of issues taking it down where we were on more even playing field. After a couple of attempts, the chick misplayed and used focus energy. Without getting a crit, that's a wasted turn, and that just barely allowed me to defeat her. Moving on, we can reach the Dewford Island, where there is the second gym leader. Brawly uses fighting types, which is not super great for us, mostly because they can learn Bulk Up, which increases their damage output by a lot. I was not sure if taking him on at this point was a good idea, but I tried it anyway. And fortunately I did get through in the first attempt. Makuhita proved to be quite tanky, especially because of the berry, but I got a high roll on the second Razor Leaf, taking it down before it could do anything. With 2 badges under our belt, we can resume our journey, and after a little while we reach Slateport, where there are Team Aqua grunts being annoying. At this point, their teams are still very weak, so I can defeat them without too many issues. The Carvanas are barely going to be a problem throughout the game, but Zubat, especially when it will evolve into Golbat or Crobat, is going to be a very big deal, especially because my grass moves are 4 times resisted. Yay, I can't wait. After dealing with that problem, we can resume our training, and we are going to very much need it, because we have another encounter with May where I get defeated twice, again. The third attempt is not very easy either, because even though I can survive, I just barely live on 4 HP after Combustion hits me with a crit Ember. Thankfully, I do not die, and I can recover most of my HP with a couple of synthesis, allowing me to take down the Lombre after recovering fully. With her team defeated, we can make our way to Mobile, where there are a whole bunch of other trainers to defeat and increase my level substantially before attempting to take on Wattson. Wattson is a bit interesting because he is not going to be able to deal that much damage to me with his electric moves since I resist them, but unless you are playing through with a water or flying type, that's not really going to be the main issue. The problem is Magneton, because it has both Thunder Wave, which will paralyze you, Supersonic, which will confuse you and be very annoying with Parafusion, and lastly Sonic Boom, which is going to always deal a fixed 20 HP damage. That may not seem a lot, considering that I have 82 HP, but with just 4 of those I end up being defeated, and considering that you will skip a lot of turns because of the previously mentioned Parafusion, this fight can end up being a pain. Fortunately, today they decided to not use Sonic Boom or Quick Attack too many times, so I was able to defeat the Electric Gym in the first attempt. Right after defeating Wattson, we can use the newly acquired Rock Smash to explore more of the region. Eventually we reach the Meterfall Caves, where we find both of the teams arguing for a little while, before being informed about Maxi, who is about to blow up a volcano. We make a beeline for him and quickly reach him and end up in a fight. My Tiena this time around, it's not going to be too big of an issue, considering that I can mostly ignore the Intimidate since I have a special move in Razor Leaf, but that's not always going to be the case. Mostly because, yeah, sure, the other Pokemon is Camerupt, which is still neutral to grass, so that's not going to be that big of a deal, even with the fire moves. But Zubat, and later Crobat, is going to be extremely painful. Yeah, I'm not going to say spoiler alert, because we all know what's going to happen. Anyway, I better worry about the problems right in my face rather than the future ones, because now we have to take on Flannery, and this was not very fun. As you can imagine, her team does an extreme amount of damage with Overhit, most of the time being enough to one-shot me. I had to attempt her a good number of times, taking breaks to level up in between very often. This fight could have been easier if I had Synthesis instead of Reflect, so that I could sort of stall her Overheat, since that move lowers your own special attack by 2 stages each time you use it. Unfortunately, I cannot do that since I'm going to need Reflect later on. Although, now that I think about it, clever use of the move Reminder could have helped me out a lot here. Oh, and yeah, by the way, a lucky crit saved me from hours of pain against Flannery. Next up is our dead Norman and his normal type Pokemons. He could have been a problem too, since his Pokémons deal a lot of damage and they are very fast. Fortunately, that did not end up being the case. I have reflected to at least lower their damage by a bit, and with some added luck, since confusion did not screw me over too bad, I was still able to defeat his team in the first attempt. Of course, the biggest obstacle, as usual, is slacking, because that guy has a lot of HP and also deals a lot of damage. Things took a bit of a weird turn as I got yawned, and I was hoping to defeat him, but instead Norman used a potion, so the fight got on a bit longer. Here I got lucky again, because sleep could have lasted a lot longer, giving him more than enough times to facade me, but instead I woke up pretty quickly and finished off the Yeti in a couple more Razor Leafs. At this point, learning Surf would have been useful, but unfortunately Chikorita can't. Instead, I just have to use it to traverse lakes and seas. Until we end up in the Weather Institute, where we have to fight against Shelly. Her team is not too strong, but I'm a bit surprised that my Tiena was able to survive a Razor Leaf. That led to a lot of damage on me, which almost took me out, but at least I can say that I did not lose to her. Immediately after that experience, we have to fight Mei Tu, and considering the track record from our previous encounters, I was kind of worried. Fortunately, this time Combusken is a much smaller problem, mostly because I am very overleveled and Body Slam is a good move. Also, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but whenever I use a Slam move, I can hear the Space Gem soundtrack playing in my head. Anyhow, the next obstacle is Winona, and she was a bit hard too, but nowhere near the levels of Flannery. This is the point where I needed Reflect, and as I previously mentioned, I made use of the move Relearner to remember Synthesis. This was sort of important, because I kind of need to stall her out, since I do not have any great move to deal with Skarmory. I did check Hidden Power, but of course it turned out to be Grass type, so totally useless. This time around, the Grass type is not going to be saved by the Hidden Power Ice to defeat literally everything. One major positive from Body Slam is the fact that it has a 30% chance to paralyze the target. That's huge, both because it sometimes makes them skip turns, but also because it might make me faster than them. Which is very good, considering that my speed is by far my lowest stat. And while that may not seem that big of a deal, considering that Pokémon is still a turn-based combat, it allows me to heal much more consistently, greatly reducing the chances of me misplaying and dying. After quite a while and a lot of body slams against the metal bird, I was finally able to take down Skarmory, but before doing so, I made sure to refresh my Reflect and heal up, so that I was in the best case scenario to fight off Altaria. That turned out to not really be needed, as I immediately got a paralysis, and from there things did not go very well for her. I did miss a couple of times because of sand attacks, but that's not as bad as it could have been. Especially because even one aerial ace after that many dragon dances could have spelled my doom. After a lot of sweat, blood and tears, we can finally acquire the flying badge and then make our way to the next town, where we meet with Mei. She is standing in front of the mall like a creep, so we end up having a fight against her to send her away. So, about Chikorita getting me a level 100, well, you see, when I first played Crystal, I chose Chikorita as my starter. Unfortunately, considering that Faulkner, the first gym, is flying, I had a very hard time against him. Considering that Faulkner, the first gym leader, is a flying type, I had a lot of trouble defeating him. So I sort of ditched my starter and got myself a PJ that turned out to be quite useful throughout most of the game. And after playing a lot with it, it reached level 100, being my first max level Pokémon ever. But even though Chikorita and later Meganium are quite bad Pokémons, I still like the design a lot. Unfortunately, Game Freak does not show them any love. Like for example, they could have made them part Fairy in Gen 6, like they did with many other Pokémons. Anyway, getting back on Emerald, it's finally time to take on Maxi, just after he woke up the legendary Pokémon. Of course, he defeats me because of Crobat, and yeah, that was obvious. At least the second time around, things get slightly better for me. I get Swaggered, which is generally not great, but considering that gives me an attack boost, that's exactly what I need to take down Crobat. Color me shocked when I outsped it. I know it's paralyzed and it has 1/4 of his original speed, but still, that's 130 base speed. After taking down the danger Pokémon, Camerupt soon after followed, and like that we defeated the Team Magma leader. After flying to the other side of the region, we have another Team Aqua Admiral to take down, and this one was also somewhat simple, but not really. I get Swaggered again, which is good since my attack desperately needs any boost it can find, but I also got confused and hit myself a couple of times. That was not enough to defeat myself, so ultimately the Admiral fell first. After a bunch of training and grinding, I think we might be ready to take on Tate and Liza. While they might seem somewhat easy, since their team is quite weak to grass types, that's not really the case, because my damage output is not very good, and so I will hardly be able to one-shot their Pokémons. And if I don't, they can always set up multiple Calm Minds, which is doubly bad for me since that raises their special defense, lowering my damage output even further. The only good thing coming out from this is that Claydol is a bit of a dummy and kept using Earthquake, which is by far the worst option he can use since that is resisted. At this point, Lunatone was starting to become a problem since it had used many Calm Minds, but fortunately Razor Leaf has a high crit rate, and for once I got a crit when I wanted it. And thanks to crits ignoring stats boost, it was just enough to defeat the Moon Pokémon. Claydol soon followed, and that's how I got the Psychic badge. Next, we have to take on the other double fight with Steven this time. This one was kind of scary, because RNG moves are going to be very prevalent, and I did not get super lucky with those lately. And also, they have 2 Intimidate Pokémons and 2 Flying Poison types, so my damage output is going to be very bad. I'm not sure which moves the Crobat and Golbat are rocking, but any flying attack is going to be a major issue for me. Somehow their AI decided I was not really a threat, so they mostly focused their attention on Metang, which was extremely good for me since with all of that attacks, even a Steel type that resists 2/3 of the types in the game ended up being defeated. In its place, Steven sent out a Skarmory, which is not that good since it too is mostly a tank Pokémon and cannot do that much damage. At this point, things were starting to die down, and with a single adversary left, I could take my time taking them down, even stopping to heal with synthesis if necessary. After a long and grueling fight, both of the Team Magma guys were defeated, and we get rewarded with the dive. Unfortunately, that's not really a reward, since I immediately have to use it to reach the seafloor cave, where we meet up with Archie, who is about to wake up Kyogre too. We cannot let that happen, so we challenge him to a fight. Things started off fine, but sort of spiraled out of control when Crobat came out. Between his flying attacks and me hitting myself in confusion, my HP levels got quite low at some points. At least I still had synthesis to top myself off after leaving with just 4 HP again. Guess that's my lucky number. After going back and forth a few times, I can finally defeat the Crobat, and soon after the Sharpedo, since that guy is much less dangerous. Once we took care of his whole team, things should be fine, but instead the red orb activates and awakens the legendary Pokémon Kyogre. With both of the legendaries awake, the weather in the region becomes a mess. To stop this whole ordeal, we have to go wake up Rayquaza so that it can stop the other two legendaries from fighting. In common Pokémon logic, a 10-year-old has to save the world from literal gods. Yeah, makes sense. After we saved everybody, we can take on the last gym. This one is water type, so it should be easy, except not. Kingdra does manage to defeat me once, since it has a powerful super effective Ice Beam. And to be honest, that only makes me worry more for what's to come in the endgame. In the second attempt, I did not change a whole lot, I just tried to play a bit more carefully. When Kingdra came out, I lowered his HP with a return, and then finished it off with a Giga Drain. That was just barely enough to get through all of his HP, and once the Seahorse is defeated, the rest of his team is my oyster, as I can just swallow them up with Giga Drain, defeating them and restoring my HP in the process. Now that we have obtained all of the badges, we can enter the Victory Road, where just after a couple of steps, we are stopped by the secondary rival of the game, Wally. His team is a bit dangerous and scary, since it has a boosting Altaria, a Magneton that I still don't know how to take down, and some other annoying Pokémons. The only thing sort of saving me is my very high level, since with that comes also a lot of stats that allow me to take down his Pokémons without having too many issues. Well, at least until Magneton came out, because of course that guy has to be a pain. I get confused and hit myself, and then Wally heals Magneton, so I have to spend a lot more time against it. But hey, at least the silver lining is that I did not get any status from Tri-Attack. Even though his team took way too long, I finally can defeat it, and once he is no longer in the way, I can resume the journey through the Victory Road. Eventually we come out the other end and can start the Elite Four. The first guy we have to take down is Sidney, and of course he is always going to be a pain with his RNG strategy. I can mitigate that by defeating his Pokémons before they can move, but that's easier said than done. because my move pool is still not the best. I improved it a little bit by adding Sunny Day and remembering Solar Beam, so at least my damage output against things that are neutral to it should be fine. Shiftry wants to annoy me too today and spams double team, but after a while I can sneak one attack in and that's enough to defeat him. The rest of Sidney's team is not that threatening, but they can be very annoying, especially because I am still confused and hitting myself. Cacturn is the real last remaining annoying Pokemon since I cannot do that much to him, and thanks to Torment I have to keep switching my moves, which is not a huge deal, but it's just tedious. Moving on to the second member of the Elite Four, Phoebe uses the usual ghost types, and the thing I do not want to see is Curse. Here I made a mistake and used Return on turn 1, but she is nice and forgives me by punching me in the face, which is much better than Curse. With the Sun up, Solar Beam is a one-turn move, but it is still not quite enough to one-shot the Dusclops, that is almost 40 levels below me. Once that tank goes down though, the remaining Pokémons are easy pickings, getting all blasted away by a Solar Beam. Even Sableye tries the double team strategy, but it does not pay out for him this time. Once we have defeated all of Phoebe's Pokémons, we can take on the third member, which is Glacia, and uses Ice types. That might seem bad for us, since she has the type advantage, but in reality she might be the easiest one of them all. I immediately take out her first Celio and then let the second one set up Hail, so that in the next turn I can switch the weather to Sun. And even though I got infatuated, I can still get through and defeat it with the Solar Beam. I did all of that because now I know that the Sun will last for the rest of the fight. And with it in place, Solar Beam can be spammed and be a one-shot on all of her Pokémons, easily closing this fight in my favor. And now for the fight that usually makes me think whether or not a Pokémon can do it. Drake is always a problem, especially today since I do not have any great moves against it. And this video was recorded before the Taurus one, so I yet did not know about the substitute stuff. As you noticed, after the first loss, I immediately used all of the rare candies to raise my level to the max. That's because I was expecting this one to be very problematic and cause me a lot of losses. Instead, I got very lucky, and in just the third attempt I managed to defeat Drake. I'm not claiming to be any genius or anything like that, because this time I really just got saved by good RNG. One crit return was enough to one-shot Salamence, and like that the fight was effectively over, since from here I can recover HP with Giga Drain and still deal damage. Maybe anticlimactic, but I'm very glad that happened. I'm already 5.5 hours into this run. I do not want to waste any more time, and that's exactly what I did with the champion. I got a bit too overexcited about the Drake stuff and forgot to heal, so it was easy for him to defeat me. I tried to set up Sun against the Wailord, but Blizzard is very threatening, so I could not stall it too much. As I was hoping, Solar Beam is a one-shot on my Lotic, so that it cannot use Toxic on me. Tentacruel could have done it, but instead it decided to go for Slash Bomb, which thankfully does not poison me, so that was effectively a free turn for me. After a few potions, I finally can defeat the Tentacruel, and with that guy down, things are really looking up. I used Sunny Day again just to make sure that I could spam Solar Beam freely, and while that was just barely not enough to defeat Ludicolo in the first attack, the second one got a higher roll, and so that guy is down too. Wishcash is always extremely easy, and I can use it to recover more HP. And while Salamence does have good moves and could be scary, his high special defense is not quite enough to save him this time. So finally, after a lot of trials and tribulations, Chikorita is a champion of the Hoenn region. If you liked the video, remember to like, share, subscribe, ring the bell, and all of that YouTube stuff. If you have any comments, video idea or feedback, leave them down in the comments. I'll be sure to read and answer all of them. See you next week. Bye!